particular, which was, yes, and the particular kind of activism was in which tradition? And she used this word called satyagraha. Anybody know that word? Yes. What does it mean? Satyagraha. Yes, which means? Yes, it is grasping for truth or truth force, or is it? And so, Kari is about to share with us about prophecy and presentiation. Presentiation, sorry. And she is someone who approaches whatever she does with great passion and great earnestness for truth-making. And it's very key that she had the word satyagraha, because if you look at that word, it is about satya, and satya in Hindi means truth. But what is at the heart of it? It's the word sat, and sat in Sanskrit basically means isness. And we are about to hear from a sister who is all about isness, and she is about isness in the most incredible, quantifiable way. Right? This is a woman who has. Who worked for the Jet Propulsion Lab for NASA, okay? How many of us have degrees in master's degrees in space system engineering? I mean, damn. And at the same time, she's a musician and a poet. And she's a mother. And she is from the tradition in her family. She comes from the Jain tradition, and the Jainism is has a very special quality around nonviolence and action. And so, I mean, Kari brings all of these amazing, amazing gifts, and what she's going to be sharing with us in terms of presentiation and prophecy, it has to do with her passion around time, around the divine feminine, and quantum physics. All right, let's welcome our sister Kari. Woo!
Thank you. It's such a blessing to be here with all of you. I love all of you guys. And here at the edge of consciousness, at the edge of the Pacific Ocean, and getting to explore these concepts. So today I'm going to talk mostly about our concept of the future, and wanting to just invite all of us really to feel into our sense of what future is. My talk today is entitled Prophecy and Presentiation, the Role of Prophecy for the Eteological Future at Time's Dusk. And this topic was inspired by the work of Jean Gebser, who most of you know and many of you have studied. And I've been really inspired by his work, and particularly his focus on the concept of time and the changing human relationship with time. And in particular, I personally, on a personal level, has really been intrigued by exploring the concept of the future. I know that I've always been a future-oriented person. When I was a child, I loved science fiction. I love thinking about, where we're headed as a species, as many of us probably do. That's why we're here. So in light of Gebser's ideas about time and our shifting relationship with time, I just found it interesting to look at our changing conception of the future, and to ask the question, what does the future really mean? What is the future really? And also I wanted to mention too, as I became older, I began to explore my artistic capacities, and began to identify myself as an idealist, and began to identify that I often approach the world and see the world, perceive things in terms of their potential. I see relationships or situations in terms of their potential, and so I just wonder, what is that potential, and how is it connected to wholeness, and is it truly a reflection of the ideal? I'm going to start with a poem. Behold, it is the eve of time, the hour when the wanderers turn toward their resting place. One God after another is coming home. Therefore, be present. And this is a poem that Gebser uses in The Ever-Present Origin, his masterwork. So Gebser identifies current human consciousness as kind of at the edge of a certain mode of consciousness called the mental mutation of consciousness. And the mental mutation of consciousness is characterized by duality. So it's characterized by our center of awareness as humans being centered in an abstracted place from our divine source, from our origin. And so as we've become more and more identified with our ego, more and more identified with an abstracted sense of self and identity, we've become increasingly aware of our power to enact change in the world around us. We've become increasingly aware of our might and our sense of will. But we've also become increasingly self-conscious and increasingly paranoid about the unknown and mysterious aspects of life. As our light has grown brighter, our shadow has grown darker. And so this has resulted in, here at the end of the mental mutation of consciousness, it's resulted in this sort of obsession and desire to control the mysterious aspects of life. And one of the ways that we do this is by attempting to quantify and analyze time. We have a tendency to spatialize time, as Gebser says. We have a tendency to see time on a line stretching from past to future. And I think one of the most, probably the most extreme example of the ways in which we attempt to control our perception of the future is through statistical prediction. This is the kind of work that people like myself as an engineer or scientist do. So as the perspective by which we view the universe and reality has become ever narrower. It's as if we're like a little bird perched on a tiny little stick or branch, as I show in this picture, viewing the entire reality before us from this very limited perspective. So some of the everyday ways that we attempt to use statistical prediction to understand and control the future is like global climate and weather prediction. This is the kind of work I did at Jet Propulsion Lab, working with scientists to create sophisticated models of the Earth system. So it's literally an attempt to identify patterns and quantify the way that the Earth works in very intricate ways, and then to project those patterns into a perceived sense of the future. And this is really at its root an attempt to control the future that I believe arises from this intense self-consciousness and inability to trust the mystery of the universe. We also, every time we engineer anything or extract resources from the Earth, this is an example of using statistical prediction. We even use it on our own bodies for medical treatments, for reproduction, for conception. And I would say the most extreme example of this type of abstracted attempt to control the future is the global economic market. And so as a result of this anxiety, we find ourselves compulsively chasing time. In this day and age, we never have enough time. We think if we just move faster and if we just get on top of it, if we just grab it, then we'll have control of it. We'll own it. But the harder we grasp, the more we reach, the more it eludes us. And we are left frustrated. I forgot to say that I'm going to be weaving in some poetry into this talk today. So from excerpts from a poem I wrote called "Behold, it is the Eve of Time." Ministers of mechanistic mind, seek in your restlessness a momentary peace. Anxious and clenching of chattering teeth, you've only been able to pursue what you seek, but the moment has come for you to make a great leap. Take the line upon which you've been balancing weary feet and crumple it up into eternity tangled. Black upon white they wrestle and fight but play. Isn't all this hoping we're doing just birth chasing after the grave? And indeed it does seem that it's just birth chasing after the grave, as we have seen over and over again how the past 100 years or maybe more, we've been reaching the limits of this mechanistic paradigm by which we were attempting to control and quantify everything around us, including our own selves, our own bodies, and even our own consciousness. So two of the major examples of indications that we're reaching the end of our paradigm is our four-dimensionality and non-locality. Four-dimensionality is a concept that Einstein provided us, which has to do with the inextricably entangled nature of space and time. And although it's extremely brilliant and invites our minds to stretch beyond our paradigm, I find it to be, when we attempt to conceive of the fourth dimension and when we attempt to understand the fourth dimension in our mental minds, the picture, the conception we have of space-time begins to collapse under the weight of this sort of the fourth dimension as perceived as like piggybacking onto the three dimensions of space. And so I think this is indicative of us reaching the end of our paradigm. Gebser agreed. He says that if the fourth dimension is considered merely as an incremental dimension and utilized as such, the result is merely a further expansion of space, which can and would have a world-destructive effect. Another example is non-locality, which is also has to do with quantum entanglement. Many of you are familiar with that concept, but it's basically the idea that we have experimental evidence that shows when two elementary particles are in connection with each other, and they're separated by space or time, and you alter one of the particles, the other particle responds in kind. And so the implication for this kind of experimental result, which we've seen over space and over time, is that all of space and time are potentially, if you carry this argument all the way to its end, they're potentially interconnected. So one thing that we can bear in mind throughout this talk is that the implication is that even if we do something now, that even the past is affected. And that's something that really blows our minds. So here we are at the crumbling edge of our paradigm. And I like to play with an image of, standing at the crumbling edge of the paradigm, and here we are faced with a mirror before us. And what we see is an image of ourselves, a distorted image of ourselves. We're faced with the ways that we've tried to take ourselves out of the equation, and the way that we objectify and try to control our entire experience of reality. And so what does this do for our sense of will and might, our sense of power? This is, even for people that consider ourselves to be conscious people that consider ourselves to be spiritual, people that consider ourselves to be courageous explorers of the new paradigm, this is deeply foundation shattering. This affects our sense of meaning as humans. And it has to do with our idea of the future. I mean, even now in this talk, I have this impression that for the next 25 minutes, I'll be talking about prophecy. But really, that's just a projection of my own attempts to control the future with my will. And so what will become of our destiny when there is no when? The borders of this fading horizon have been sketched completely, and the fortress drawn within its boundaries wrecked irreversibly. I've hidden myself under blankets woven of numbers and told myself they were my skin. I tried to dress the inside of my mind by spinning equations over and over again, and spinning in my certainty clothmaker I have created instead of a home a casket, preparing to die. Like a caterpillar with frantic feet, my myopic eyes have zoomed in upon methodical loom, constructing before me a deadly white cocoon. To seal for myself with hypnotic zeal my own whitewashed tomb, inscribed in delicate detail with celebratory epitaph, praising abundance and manifest destiny, to lay silent in spent-up certainty. So here we lay silent in spent-up certainty, and we wonder what's next. And Gebser talks about our perception, our experience of time in the coming mutation of consciousness, the mutation of consciousness that seems to be incipient in our psyches as humans. And this is why I love Gebser so much, because he's providing a matrix and a context for understanding something that many of us feel. We feel an emergent new mode arising within us. So Gebser talks about the way of understanding and experiencing time in this integral mode of consciousness, and he calls our experience of time the achronon. This is a state of time, not timelessness, but time freedom. So it's a state in which timelessness and time coexist simultaneously. And Gebser talks about a deep present moment. That time, integral time, it's not a spatialized experience of time stretching from past to future, but it's a deep present, and it's not like the power of now, like just forgetting everything and just like standing in the middle between past and future. But it's a present moment, a deep present moment in which the past and the future are unfolded in the present. Gebser uses the term etiology. It comes from the term that he made up called eteon, which I believe means being in truth. And so he talks about integral time being one great etiological moment. And in this moment, it's a moment of exchange, co-creation transformation, relationship with origin, between humanity and origin. It's a simultaneous perceiving and imparting of truth. But how do we get there? Gebser talks a little bit about memory, and he talks about memory as being extremely insidious because memory resides in our unconscious psyche, unconscious part of our psyche. And I believe that in the mental mode of consciousness, past and future are completely linked. So when we have unconscious, psychologically biased memories stored in our psyche, in our unconscious psyche, I believe that our perception of life is completely affected by that. And as we move forward into the future, as we make our decisions, we are always reacting to this unconsciously stored, psychologically biased memory. And so our memories are shackles in this way. So how do we bring a purified sense of past into the present from this abstracted perspective that we have on life, where we're disconnected from our divine origin? I'll just leave you with that question for now. I take each moment and break in on it, plundering for purpose. But each one evades me like a worm. Every cut becomes another surface. So I cut it again, more precise about when this time. More hastily then I try to capture and contain it. My observing ocular gaze in woven waving rays makes of chance with fleeting glance corpuscular particles of hardened purple haze. One moment at a time, reality seemed fully mine, and I stood triumphant on the spine of Atlas's straining form. I was getting somewhere, unveiling solid ground upon rock. But as my footsteps faltered upon his shoulders, Atlas, my neglected confidant, in waking passion, decided to shrug. Strained beneath condensed expression of time, his four-dimensional body, sketched hastily in magnetic field lines, shuddered. So as I mentioned earlier, the etiological moment contains the future and the past within it. It's a deep present that enfolds future and past as latent within it. And so, in what sense does the future exist with us now? And as it does exist with us, in what sense is it ideal? In what sense is it something that we should allow to inform us as we move through life? What does it mean to embrace the future in the present? I believe that what we need is not synthesis, what we need is not transcendence, but we need wholeness. We need connection with wholeness. We need a spiritual dimension to enter our lives. We need wholeness to illuminate the way. But as the mental mutation of consciousness is characterized by duality, by disconnection and abstraction from our origin, how do we access wholeness in this perspective? And I think this is where religion comes in to the picture. Gebser talks about religion as a mental mutation phenomenon. It's because we are abstracted from our divine origin, we need some sort of mediator, not necessarily a person or an institution, but some sort of mediator to mediate our relationship with the divine origin. And so here we have an image of that mental mutation duality. On one side we have the thinker, the rational part of the human psyche, the logical part. And here on the other side of the stained glass we have religion. Gebser talks about religion as, the word religion as coming from the word relegar, which means to tie back. And it's basically, from what I understand, it's a catch-all for the irrational, numinous, mysterious, enshrouded aspects of human experience. Okay, and so we come to prophecy finally. Prophecy has many different meanings and definitions to different people, but in this talk today, and the way that I like to think of it, I like this definition of it: an inspired utterance of a prophet viewed as a revelation of divine will. And prophecy is a distinctly mental phenomenon because it's a religious phenomenon. And prophecy often comes to us in the form of symbol, which is also a mental phenomenon, is the capacity for symbolic, abstract thought. And so prophecy is kind of interesting because it's a concept of the future, just as statistical prediction is. But it couldn't be any more different because it's informed by a true connection in its theoretically accurate form. It's inspired by a true connection with divine origin. And so in this way, prophecy is a bridge between the irrational and irrational dualized aspects of the mental human consciousness. This bridging is, though transient, an expression of wholeness in the mental mode of consciousness. And it's transient because it happens in the symbolic realm. So it's not connected through an embodied way to divine origin, but it does arise as a reflection, a direct projection and reflection of divine origin, an accurate reflection. Atlas had fallen asleep, perched atop swirls of nested collective memory neglected. The remainder of uncarved karmic stone crumbled at the touch of quantum foam. In this age of Aquarian river catcher rescuing from Dust Bowl torture, how do I stake my claim for gold when there's no longer a golden sunset westward? Even the sun's rays, exhausted emissaries of golden spiritual gaze, have surrendered in protest. In this foggy, darkened dawn, they dance in subtle play. Their edges soft and mossy, they paint the world in shades of gray. And I can find no more sharp lines to build a shelter that will stay. So the river has to make a turn today. So one of the really exciting things about the symbolic realm and the mental mutation of consciousness is the capacity to represent relationship. So I can take my relationship between myself and this computer, and I can take Josh's relationship between him and the computer, and I can symbolize these two relationships in the abstract realm. I can symbolize them in my mind. I can envision these two relationships. And then what I can do is I can take the relationship between those relationships and I can symbolize that. And so in the mental mutation of consciousness, in the abstract symbolic realm, you have the capacity to continue to abstract and abstract and abstract, and to the nth degree, to the point that you can symbolize absolute wholeness in an accurate way. We have the potential to do that. And that's what I think Teilhard calls the omega point. So as the prophet is able to have a true connection with the divine, a true inspiration through the religious medium, a true inspiration from the divine, a true picture of wholeness, then combined with the prophet's rational, symbolic mind, you have a bridging of the duality of the mental mutation of consciousness that is an accurate image of wholeness. And this is the prophecy. This is the prophecy of the future. And you couldn't be any more different between this and statistical prediction. Well, whereas the statistical prediction separates the subjective observing self from the objectified world around him or her. Prophecy is a picture of the future that invites the prophet to step forward into that future, because the prophetic future includes the deeper, truer self of the prophet. He or she sees her true self embedded within this reflection. So in this way, we have a future that becomes purified by wholeness. And as we begin to embody this future, we can step into a deeper relationship with divine origin. And in this way, we can even begin to purify our understanding of the past and purify the memories that lie in our unconscious mind. I spotted the bottom of the riverbed and counted spotted rocks I thought were dead. The rocks cried out enchanted, "Move away from weary head, open stony hearts instead. Turn this river from water clear to sacramental wine, blood red. Incarnate conscious golden light in awakened flesh. Gather dreams and memories so your clocks can finally rest. Let the sun hold hands with the shifting sands lining the shore of your beating chest. You are glory. You are pain. You are the one who swallows the rain to let it flow out from you in tears. Each prism droplet encompasses years and ages. Close your eyes and recognize that you are all great sages, carrying moving space and time within your body, heart, and mind. So Gebser talks about the mediator between human consciousness and divine origin and the integral mutation of consciousness as preligion. In preligion, there's no room for hope. There's no room for memory, because it's a conscious manifestation of an ideal state of connection and communion with wholeness. And so as we tap into our own capacities for prophecy, I believe that this can be a call to us, a call to humanity, as each one of us as individuals cultivates our connection with spiritual divine origin. The prophetic future can arise from the ideal of wholeness, shimmering through the veil of time to call each person towards itself in an embodied way. And in this way, through each one of our bodies, we begin to birth the integral age. Guided by our mental notion of wholeness, we'll find our way to a living present in which the Spirit shines on and through us, illuminating time and timelessness to erupt in us and incarnate the prophecies of today. You are halo. You are horns. You unite the world as holy source, and in your tears the river finds its rolling course. So in this moving river stand, holding rock in softened hand, and drop it in the sand below so it as seed can plant and grow. Waving branches through infinite chances in the water will. The river flows and flows and flows back around to itself like the snake biting on its tail. And you, miracle of inspired fleshly shiver, ever kissed by blood, you must in bliss become the river and let the river flood. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I discussed it all. I covered it all.
It potentially runs into problems with people who insist that they know the answer, that they know how something's going to go. So I'm curious sort of your sense of how, in our own understanding of what's ahead of us, we might come to recognize something that feels more real or inclusive of sharing and everybody participating, and what might seem more like, yeah, like you're just coming up with the key, and that's maybe one key, but we all might have keys. So, you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I delivered this talk at the Gebser conference a couple weeks ago, and I had the same question there. And I was laughing because I thought, oh, there I go again, the idealist. You know, here I am talking about prophecy, but obviously I'm talking about an ideal type of prophecy. So this is a theoretical talk. But I think, I don't know, I think that process is really important. So, you know, the way I talk about prophecy, it's like I'm talking about it as more of an individual capacity to be inspired by a sense of the future, whether it's the future of the world or one's own individual future, and using that as a way to step into a more embodied relationship with divine origin. So, and I think as we do that, then we truly do commune more and more with that mystery and with our divine source. And then our, theoretically, our prophetic sense of the future will become ever more accurate as we're ever more embodying wholeness. And that's my best answer. I mean, I don't think it's black and white in that way. And I also think that, you know, I could have talked about modern day prophets. You know, I could have tried to talk about Sai Baba or, you know, but I'm not. I'm talking about the sense of prophecy and empowering individuals to tap into their sense of ideal future.
And I would just say, I think it's, you just want to use discernment with people who insist on that they know, you know, because I think.
But then that might not actually be prophecy if it's just like their own ego-driven delusion. And then in that sense, then it's not the prophecy that I'm talking about. It's not pure. Erica?
Let's just kind of go on the heels of that really quick. Prophecy isn't prediction. It's like a possibility. It's sort of speaking to the quantum vacuum of here's a bounded set of possibilities of things that can happen. And so it's not the same as saying, I know what's going to happen. So like I have a prophecy by 2020, everybody's pension is gone. But that doesn't have to happen. And I think it's very hard for the mental mind to, or the mind as such now to really understand how to hold that. It's more like, oh, well, if that's true, then what am I doing in my life? Like, how am I going to collaborate with that vision of doom? Or
yes.
How am I going to create a more beautiful, like, what do I want? What do we want? What do we all want? So
I think that when I wrote the paper for this and when I did the presentation, it was all inspired by one particular quote from Gebser in which he talks about prophecy as an invitation. And to me, that was so beautiful because that's so accurate in my own experience. It's literally like you have an image of wholeness and it's like, here, come here. You know what I mean? Come here, let's make this happen. Let's collaborate to make this happen. So I love what you said, yeah.
I was wondering, it seems like, you spoke of empowerment and embodying wholeness, and I was wondering, it seems like a lot of us would probably not look to the current education system as, birthing that integral age. I was wondering if there's like, if you had a sort of almost recommendation or like sort of where should we be going towards in terms of education, like to better, I guess, seek out that wholeness and facilitate that process, or, like help us on that journey. Obviously your presentation did a lot of that regard.
That's good, thank you. Yeah, I like that question a lot. I haven't given it a lot of thought, but I have a 3-year-old son, so I think a lot about education these days because he's going to have to go to preschool soon. As many of us in this room probably do, I love Waldorf education. I think, the Waldorf emphasis on including a spiritual dimension to education and very importantly, like focusing on nature. I think that, a relationship with nature and organic processes and organic timing and rhythms is a way of helping us from a young age embody and understand wholeness and to, like, in a really deep way, to understand wholeness. I think that's one thing. I also think, it's deliberate for me to weave my poetry into the presentation and then to talk with such, like, precision in the other parts of the presentation because I think it's important to begin to start poetry is a powerful invitation to the integral mutation of consciousness and other forms of art and even meditation. And so I think it's important to start weaving that kind of stuff in. And I also think in education I could imagine a co-creative model where students are invited to teach each other, invited to connect more with their souls through art and poetry. So
There's a school in Bali, and their curriculum is built off of Gebser's Mutations of Consciousness and Jung's Cross of the Self. And it's K through 12. It's called the Green School.
Green.
I can talk to you more about it, but
that's cool.
So amazing.
Oh, man. Kat first, then Mike.
I think I might have missed something because I didn't understand, so help me understand. You were talking about the relationship between you and the computer and Josh and the computer and then abstracting that. I'm sort of seeing triangle, and then you do the relationship between that and abstracting that. And then you talked about how you can abstract continually in relationships, kind of till you got a wholeness image of relationship to that image. And so kind of what I heard through that is like getting that image was a process of abstracting. But at the same time, I know you'd be somebody who brings in, embodiment into everything. So I was confused about what you were saying about the process of arriving at an image of our relationship to divine wholeness as it relates to abstracting and embodying.
Yeah, I think that image, that pure image of divine wholeness, would not be embodied at all. In a purely theoretical sense, as I envision it, it's like the peak. I was trying to sort of redeem and glorify the mental mutation, even the deficient form of it. It's the peak of absolute rationality. It's the peak of absolute deficient. Well, I don't even know if it's deficient or not. It might be efficient, but it's the peak of the mental mutation of consciousness. It's like that capacity to abstract. That's the glory of it, is that you can symbolize relationship. And so in that way, it's like you get to that peak and all of a sudden you can't go any further. It's kind of like, I love like the image of the Earth from space. And when we first saw the Earth from space, it's like we stepped away, and all of a sudden here we were at the peak of abstraction, and oh my gosh, the glory of the Earth, and now I want to return home. And so that, and I think that's that moment that I'm talking about. Yeah. So Mike, and then I guess we should wrap it up.
I was just reminded about a Jewish metaphysician, Maimonides, who says that prophecy is a union of poetry and philosophy. So I just wanted to thank you for sort of representing that in both content and form in your presentation. And going back to what you were saying about prediction, I think because prophecy is poetic and not predictive, it's hard to say when a prophecy is fulfilled, or just like it's hard to say when we fully interpret a poem. It never ends. I think that's the power of prophecy. It's almost always happening.
Right.
It is poetic. It allows us to see our life and our meaning as poetic as opposed to calculation.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, I think with prophecies, like I have an image that we step into it, and until all of a sudden we are it, until all of a sudden we are the prophecy. But then in the integral mutation, supposedly we still have a sense of time, we still have a sense of future, but we're in it. We're living the future, we're living the past, and we're living the present. So I'll leave it at that because that sounds kind of poetic. So thank you.